Hi everyone, I'm Mike, Director of Product at The Flow. I decided to include this picture because the other day I got the Apple Intelligence thing, and that was the first thing it gave me. It made me a wallpaper with a picture I don't even know when it was taken. It's usually my face at work, to be perfectly honest. I'm going to talk about measuring what matters. It's basically just a story over the last 4 years of what I've been doing at The Flow and where we've got to. And some of the things that I found out in the last 12 months, I kind of wish I'd have known 3 or 4 years ago and started with rather than kind of over the last year, because they've really helped us accelerate to a new place. So that's the point of my talk. And like I say, I think if I had to do it again, even though it feels like it's been quite successful, I would have started with the scorecard because it would have made a lot of the conversations I was having a lot easier, especially when we had a bigger sales team, because the minute you start talking numbers and asking about margin and they think it's going to erode away, then we get somewhere. Thanks very much.
Hi guys, my name's Rachel. Pleased to be here. Thanks Mike for kicking us off. I've got a question for you, so remind me if I don't ask it at the end. So I'm going to take a slightly different tact to Mike, probably coming from reflections of sort of managing teams through a pandemic and then working in a company that's been going through difficult times. So I want to kind of talk about the art of focus and how we can create space and time to do deep work and work that matters. And if you can't hear me at the back, guys, do just ask me to shout up. So I'm going to start with a definition of burnout. So the World Health Organization came up with a definition for burnout in 2019. And they defined burnout as a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So burnout doesn't mean lying on the floor, like unable to do anything. Burnout has 3 characteristics. So one characteristic is a sense of energy depletion, so feeling exhausted. The second characteristic is a sense of mental distance from your work. So perhaps finding it difficult to kind of get your head into a task, or perhaps finding that you're unable to even complete simple tasks. And the third characteristic is a sense of negativity. So having negative feelings about your work or your workplace environment. And then invariably that does lead to a reduction in your productivity. So why am I talking about this? So as a product leader or a product team member, why do I care about this? And for me, it's because we are knowledge workers. Like, we need our brains to add value and be impactful for our customers and our businesses. So yeah, if we want to kind of be able to keep hold of that value in an increasingly distracting environment, I do feel like we have to start looking at new and different skills to help us navigate that world. So we've kind of got to acknowledge we're all different people. We live different lives. We work in different environments. So I'm definitely not coming here today and saying, here's a problem and here's a tidy solution. But what I am hoping is that I can give you guys some thoughts or provoke some consideration and maybe allow you to maybe go away and reflect on what kind of stops you from focusing day to day. How can you help create a calmer environment, and not just for yourself, but for your colleagues as well? And then, yeah, maybe what can you do differently to help you find your flow state? So I'm going to jump first into kind of what are the things that make it hard for us to focus day to day. So Rob Cross and Karen Dillon did a study, I think it was in 2019, and they interviewed hundreds of professionals because they wanted to understand what makes some people high performing. And interestingly, they came out with this concept of microstresses. So a microstress is a small thing that can often go unnoticed, like a small stressor. But if they accumulate day after day, week after week, then that can lead to chronic stress and ultimately burnout. So I'm going to look at these 3 categories that they described for microstresses, but I'm just going to kind of look at 2. And the first category is microstresses that can drain our personal capacity. So back to that definition of burnout, these are things that can lead to that sense of energy depletion or exhaustion. And it's not rocket science. Like, is literally too many priorities. So we often find ourselves just doing too much stuff, not prioritizing our work. And that leads to that continuous sense of overwork. which leads to overwhelm. The second thing, and this is worded as unpredictable or demanding behavior from superiors or leads, and that can keep you in a state of constant alertness or vigilance. But for me, I like to think about this not just as our sort of leadership teams, but just imagine a constant disruption of like Slack messages, emails, Google Chat messages, where you're just getting interrupted by small things. So again, that adds to that sort of eating into your time each day. The second category, and this is sort of micro stresses that can deplete your emotional reserves. So again, back to that definition of burnout, these are things that contribute to that sense of negativity. And just again, calling out two things from this category. So one is being surrounded by other people's stress. So if say someone from the leadership team seems stressed or anxious, we're social beings, we can take that on to ourselves. And the second one here, this is one I definitely suffer from. And this is not being able to meet your own expectations. So if you start your day with a to-do list or you have some priorities for the week and you don't feel like you're able to do them, that can create like an internal sense of failure, and that can accumulate as well. So I want to touch on this thing about collaborative overload. And I want you to just visualize your work diaries for a minute. So mine is a Google Calendar. So if I visualize my Google Calendar for the week, think about the number of blocks in that calendar that are taken up with meetings. So project meetings, workshops, one-to-ones, ad hoc catch-ups. And then think about the amount of white space that's left in that calendar. And then think about the amount of work that comes in, say, from emails, Slack messages, Jira notifications, Mira board notifications, and God knows how many other tools we've got that have got notifications in. And in this article that I read in the Harvard Business Review, they suggest that 85% of a manager's time is taken up with these activities. And I think for me, that's pretty generous, because I know if I visualize my calendar, quite often from even before 9 till after 5, it's just back-to-back meetings. But if we do assume that this 85% is correct, if we're planning work for teams, we always try and go for an 80-20 rule. So only have 80% of your time dedicated to productive work. So if we're starting at 85%, we're already at a time deficit. So we've talked through the tangible aspects that can contribute to a sense of burnout and create microstresses. What I want to touch on a little bit now is what's happening to us physically as we experience those microstresses. So I want to talk about the human stress response. So our bodies are kind of amazing machines. They will adapt without us even realizing it to kind of respond to the environment that we're in. We have 3 sort of primary states, but I'm just going to talk about the 2 of them that I think are relevant. So we've got our rest and digest state, and this is the state that we should be in sort of most of the time. This is our default state. So when we're in this state, our heart rate will be normal. Our breathing should be fairly relaxed, sort of deep breaths. And our body should be functioning normally or optimally. So things like your digestive system, your immune system is optimally working away. What is super interesting in the context of deep work, when you're in this state, your prefrontal cortex is fully engaged, and that's the part of your brain that you need to be able to do deep work, to be creative, to be innovative. So when you're in this state, you're generally feeling calm, you're feeling emotionally well regulated, and you're able to be social as well. So if you're in workshops with others, you'll probably be in a really nice state for being a good team worker, feeling happy, bringing your best ideas forward. If we flip though, and imagine you're experiencing a micro stress, so it could be something as simple as the last meeting running over 5 minutes, so you're turning up late. Your body will flip into what we call our fight or flight state. And in this state, you'll experience your heart rate will increase a little bit. Your breathing will go shorter. Your non-essential processes will be inhibited or impacted. So things like your digestive system, your immune system, they'll be compromised. But more importantly as well, your prefrontal cortex won't be engaged. You'll be using what they call the amygdala part of your brain. So that's the part of your brain that's responsible for emotions, behavior, and memories. So when you're in this state, you'll be more decisive, more reactive. You'll be quite instinctive. So you'll be looking for things that you've done previously, and you won't be able to really think innovatively or creatively. And also, you won't be as social. So you won't be as open to exploring ideas and things other people are suggesting. And it is worth mentioning in this state as well, your body does release stress hormones. So adrenaline, cortisol, and other inflammatory hormones. And that's brilliant if you're running for a bus. But if you're just sat at your desk, they're not always the best sort of things to have going around your body. Behavioral impacts when you're in this mode as well. You might be feeling quite alert, quite anxious, maybe not listening. I know one of my tells is that I can be on the edge of my seat, not listening, or just waiting to speak. So I know when I'm feeling that I'm doing that, I need probably just step back a little bit. So we've talked about the tangible aspects that can contribute to a sense of stress. We've talked about the physical aspects that can contribute to a sense of stress. What I'm going to chat about now is, and I'm going to work from the inside out, because I think if we acknowledge we can't really do our best work or work deeply if we're in that fight or flight state. So you're going to work from the inside out and think, how can we bring ourselves back to that state of calm first? So a lot of you might be super familiar with these. I'm just going to share sort of 5 sort of quick pause and reset techniques. There's millions of them probably. So do find what works for you. And I'm probably just going to call 2 of them out. So the first one, really simply, just pause and take a moment to breathe. There's lots of different breathing techniques. So triangle breathing, box breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, alternate nostril breathing, loads of them. And this isn't just for work either. Like if you're rushing to get somewhere in the car, maybe if you're stopping at the lights, just take a moment just to breathe. And even now, I need to take a moment to breathe. And the other one I will call out is quite simply stretching. So we tend to hold tension in our faces, in our necks, in our shoulders, and in our chest, and in what we call our psoas muscles, or fight or flight muscles. So if you are feeling that tension, just take a few moments just to stretch out those areas. And it's really, really effective. And yeah, lots of other things. And it does just take a couple of minutes. I think the pause and reset are great for when you're in the moment. But I think sometimes we can get into a state where we just don't have a lot of calm in our lives, and life can just feel like one massive to-do list. So thinking about how can we bring more calm into our daily routines? How can we create a sense of balance? I just want to call out 2 things on this slide. So a lot of research has proven that the right-hand side of our brain, engaging in activities that use the right-hand side of our brain, can reduce anxiety, help to reduce depression, and really clear our mind. So some things in this space, if you're a creative person, if you play music, do art, maybe dancing, just building that into your lifestyle can be incredibly effective. And as well, it's time away from screens, phones, and notifications. If you're not creative, not a problem, because connecting with other people is just as effective. So maybe team sports or going out with friends, spending time with family, things like that. I do recommend, though, sometimes just deep restorative activities can be really good. So whether that's a long walk in nature or perhaps some restorative yoga sessions, yin yoga or nidra yoga, really, really good. And I personally love to treat myself to a spa day. That's effective as well. So if we acknowledge that a lot of this stress isn't just a mental thing, it's a physical thing as well. And if we've managed to find a way to get our bodies back into a more restful state, then only then can we come back to the more tangible aspects. So going back to our micro stresses, all I've done here is just put some of the micro stresses in one column and then like a try in the other column. So it's literally just, if I'm feeling this, what can we try to counteract it? So the first one, very simply, if you have too many priorities and find yourself constantly context switching, like what can you do? So I've just dropped the most obvious thing to me here, which is the Eisenhower matrix. And as product people, we're probably quite good at finding prioritization tools. But the Eisenhower matrix looking at it really ruthlessly and saying, what do I actually need to do right now, immediately? What can I perhaps defer to later? What can I delegate? Like, quite often there's a lot of people around us and maybe we're just not using them as effectively as we could. And then as well, what can you delete? I think quite often, like, we don't look seriously enough at like what would happen if I just binned off that meeting or just didn't do that piece of work. Who would come screaming? But I do want to say, if you do genuinely feel like there's too much stuff in the do box, do seek support. We have to recognize that time is finite, energy is finite, and within the laws of physics, you can't do everything. So do seek support. I'm going to jump to the last one. So if, like me, you struggle to meet the goals that you set for yourself, I kind of pulled out this saying from Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. So when it comes to me and my to-do list, and I literally do write a massive to-do list and I don't even look at my diary. I'm just like, why? So something sensible would be to maybe look at my diary and then write my to-do list, or put my to-do list into my diary and prioritize it alongside the other stuff. But the other thing is perhaps change my attitude a little bit, like stop trying to be perfect and celebrate when I am making progress. But yeah, changing the attitude. So that brings us to, how can we create time and space for deep work? So we've kind of looked at how to tackle the micro stresses. We've looked at how we can maybe bring our bodies into a state for deep work. So I recently read a book by Cal Newport called Deep Work, and this comes from that book. So there's 4 rules. I'm going to go through them backwards because I think 3 of them help us prepare for a flow state, and the 4th one, or the first one, helps us in that flow state. So the 4th one, we've kind of touched on this, and this is drain the shallows. So how can you reduce the amount of shallow work in your diary? And I do think the Eisenhower matrix is really good for that one. The second one, this was in the book as quit social media, but in a work sense, I'm going to say quit unproductive tools. So again, taking an example from my life, I've got a to-do list on my phone. I've got different to-do lists on each of my laptops, and I've got a device for to-do lists on notes. So immediately there, I could just have one app and have them synced, and that would be hugely efficient for me. But yeah, really think about what can you to try and do to simplify the number of tools that you use, or simplify the number of distractions that you've got. And then the rule 2, so this is embrace calm. And I think we kind of touched on this with addressing the body aspects. How can we bring ourselves back to calm? So yeah, train yourself to be comfortable with an undistracted mind. That is much easier said than done. I know quite often I'll sit down to write a strategy document, I'll do the title, and I'll literally go look in Slack to see if anybody's messaged me. So yeah, what can we do to try and get used to having time and space and empty mind? I personally have got into meditation, not for everybody, but yeah, try and find something that works for you. Avoid distractions. So like me and that immediately going to Slack, I could just close all of those apps down and kind of, make sure my head's in the right space. And then work deeply. So again, similar to adding your to-do list to your calendar, try and prioritize time for deep work into your calendar as well. Prioritize that in amongst it. And it might not be that you look at it on a weekly view, but maybe if you work in quarterly cycles, you can plan time a little further out for doing the work that matters. And also try and choose a strategy that works for you. So are you someone who likes to do short bursts and then have a break and do something else? Or are you someone who's more active in the morning? So you'll do your best work in the morning, and in the afternoon, you could maybe do some of that shallower work. Or do you sometimes just prefer to do one big stint, like 15 hours, head down, just get something done? Yeah. So it is really, really find out what works for you. So I want to say thank you. That was my talk. As I say, I'm not expecting people to find what works for some people to work for them, but hopefully I've given you some things to reflect on and think about. I do genuinely think, like, we've been through a pandemic together, a lot of business are still trying to recover and coming up to do. A lot of people are not finding things easy at the moment. So I do want to shout out some signposts. The first thing I will say is most of us have access to EAPs. These are fully qualified therapists, completely paid for by your company. Your company and your bosses don't have to know you're using them, and they certainly don't know what's being discussed. So yeah, thank you.
I'm going to talk about empowered to succeed decision-making in product, because to me, if there is one thing at the heart of all product work, it's decision-making. Because we've all been told we should be empowered by this guy. Who's read Inspired? Empowered? Transformed? Okay, most product people have read Inspired at some point. I actually prefer Sense and Respond by Jeff and Josh. Much better book in terms of mindset. But yeah, we've been told we've got to be empowered, but we don't really know what empowered means in many cases. If you talk to Marty, and I have done at length, he hates it when people use the word autonomous. Because autonomous, people think they're a synonym. But autonomous gets interpreted as meaning, do that what the fuck you want. Like teams get really pissed off when they're told what to do by their leadership, where they're given a strategy, given any direction, because they're no longer autonomous. They're now being told what to do. It's not what Marty means by empowered. He means empowered with problems to solve. It's leadership's job to decide on the problems to solve. There's different tiers of empowerment and different levels of decisions that need to be made. Oh, I should have asked you that question first, but I forgot. I'm doing a fast version. I normally do a 45-minute version of this. So who am I? Well, I'm a product leadership coach. And my mission, fundamentally, is to help people think clearly, make clear decisions, take action, and drive outcomes. That's what I help people do. And I distilled that down about 6 months ago, because that's what I realized what I actually did when I was working with product leaders. It was getting to those decisions, because everything in product comes back to it. Having that data that Mike talked about is about being able to make decisions and make them clearly and concisely. And I love it when we get to the ability to make those decisions and make those trade-offs and have, I prefer to use the word evidence as opposed to data in front of us. I don't need to do that when I'm in Yorkshire. Normally I'm in a foreign country and it's like, what the fuck's that accent? You're not from London. You're not even British, are you? You're South African. But I don't think I want to need you here today. So yeah, to me, empowerment is all about making decisions. Which decisions can we make? But it's not all decisions. We can't just make every decision on the planet. And then sometimes there are decisions that get made that even feel like you need to add this feature. And leadership make that decision. And they come to the team and say, you need to do this. We all can say, stop telling us about the solution. What's the problem? Sometimes they can't tell you. My favorite example there was a team that getting pushed to add an API integration to their product. And strategically, it didn't seem to make sense. It didn't fit with the OKRs. It didn't fit with the direction. It didn't fit with the problems they were hearing about. But the reason was because there was an acquisition happening. There was a strategically important reason that had to be in the product to make that acquisition go through cleanly. And so I often end up asking myself that question of, what can't I know, or what don't I know? Because leaders don't want to turn up and tell you what to do most of the time. They actually want to give you as much empowerment as possible. But sometimes they can't share all the information. As Mike said, you're joining a business right at the start. Yeah, we've only got 6 months of run rate. Maybe we're not sharing that. There's information that can't be shared everywhere. I love the level of transparency you guys sharing that scorecard, though. It does take a certain culture. So we've got to agree that empowerment is not infinite, it's finite. There's a zone of control, shall we say. So there's a certain area that we can make decisions around. But then there's some decisions that don't really belong to you. As a team, product fundamentally is a team sport. I hate talking about decisions just being made by product managers, because the reality is we are a team. A product manager can deliver diddly squat on their own. Maybe in the future with AI, we'll be not needing engineers. I have a slightly different prediction. I have a prediction that the ratios will change. Maybe 1 or 2 engineers per product manager, because the engineers will be so much more productive. Right. But so will be the product managers as well, actually getting to those decisions and then being able to quickly deliver against them. I actually think there's a good chance it's going to drive a need for more product people, not less. I mean, you can do scenario planning, right? We're product people, we do this strategic thinking. And so you've got scenarios where, right, we're not going to need product managers because engineers are going to do it and AI is going to tell us all the answers. I'm skeptical. Or we're going to have a scenario where actually the engineering team, which are the team being most affected by AI in terms of productivity, their productivity goes through the roof. Well, hold on a second, that means I can have less people delivering the same amount of value, or I can take the number of people I've got right now and deliver even more value. I know most companies are going to choose the latter. That means they make more. And if they get to deliver more value, that means they need more direction, which probably means they need more discovery taking place, so more designers, more product managers actually out there doing that work. So we deliver the right value. And as a team, ultimately, that means we're making more decisions. But our decisions kind of are in this box we've just said. Well, how do we define that box? To me, I call that a mission. I like thinking about mission-oriented teams. I like thinking about what is the direction this team is going. And to me, it's one of the most high-leverage decisions you can make in any product organization. What is the mission of that team? Because ultimately, in a waterfall world, we used to commission projects. And so we'd set a team up and they'd go and deliver. In an agile world, we fund a team, and that team exists for a good long period of time because we know that durable teams are far more efficient, far more effective, deliver more. They get into the domain, they understand it, they get through the fight, the whole storm, form, and norm of building a team. So we want to create that context where they know what the heck they're supposed to be doing, where they can make decisions. And we do that by giving them a mission. Now, some people are scared of having a mission because that might mean they have to make some decisions. And shock horror, some people would actually quite like to be in a feature factory. It's easier. Tell me what to do and I'll ship. There's a lot of people out there that would actually quite like that. I'm not one of them, and I suspect you aren't either. But there are definitely people out there. So they're scared of being given this mission because then they're given ownership to go and do something and make those decisions. And frankly, because of that, they're scared of other people then are also scared of giving them a mission. Because, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to actually deliver against it? Are they going to create the value that we want? Are they going to go off on some random tangent? I've seen teams where I empowered them or gave them autonomy and they just did the wrong stuff. Or I'm a bit of a control freak, megalomaniac. I'm a megalomaniac. It takes a lot for me to step back and say, no, I'm getting out of the way. But we know that it's the best way to create really high-performing teams. Which fundamentally makes missions hard. Now, when I define a mission, there are 4 things I typically put into one. At the top is the North Star. What needle do I expect that team? Not the overall product, that specific team. It should ladder up to the overall product North Star, but it's that team's North Star. If they are moving that over the long term, they're achieving the right things. What persona or role or group of customers do they serve? So you talked about actuarial people. Now, I've worked with a business recently that's in the insurance space. They have a team that serves actuaries. They have a team that serves underwriters. They know who their customers are so that they can go and do the right discovery with the right people and understand their problems. And as they scale, they'll suddenly find that they can't just limit to the persona they're dealing with, because they'll have 5 teams dealing with actuaries. They'll have 5 teams dealing with underwriters. So then we have to start thinking about which types of problems are they then solving as a team. As I said, Marty would say you're empowered with a problem to solve. Now, I tend to take a bit of an entrepreneurial view on product management. I'm out there finding the problems. I'm not expecting someone to tell me them all, but I do expect that the team knows the general problem space they're operating in. Like solving things to do with actuarial, like underwriting of an insurance policy is one thing. If they go off and find something about how do I increase the fitness of people, of actuaries, maybe they're going a bit off mission. And then lastly, sometimes you even start slicing on where in the journey. Like, okay, they're serving, one of my other favorite customers at the moment is a cryptocurrency exchange. So we've got an onboarding squad. There's a buying squad. There's a selling squad. And it's like, now some of those in the past were a single squad and they've fractured out because they're doing different parts of their journey, and which is essentially a different set of screens, and they can then optimize into those different areas. Sometimes we've got to find the ways of slicing, but this is kind of the order that I introduce them as things scale. We start with a North Star. We then think about who they're serving. We then think about what problems they're solving. And we've probably got something along those lines at the very start, but it's quite broad and it narrows over time. And then we zoom in on the journey. And then we get out of the way. Because they can go out there and say, right, I'm moving this needle for these people, solving these problems in this part of their journey. And if the team is doing that, why am I getting in the way? Unless it's something strategically important that they can't know that I need to bring into the room. There's the meta statement, though. Giving a mission is a decision in its own right. And we heard earlier, I thought, that's coming in a second. So I'm actually writing a book all about decision making. It was called It Depends, hence the URL at the top, until very recently. And over the Christmas period, it's completely changed direction. It's now called Making Product Decisions. And it's going to be diving into those specific decisions. But it's also creating a framework for decision making, a number of decision making principles. They're all familiar to you. Things like disagree and commit. But kind of bring them into that product space, because frankly, none of you have been taught how to make decisions. You're just alive, so we assume that you can make a decision because you're not dead, but there were probably some suboptimal ones in there. So think about how we make decisions and recognizing that it's not just getting to the decision, the workshops and stuff, or even the making. That's actually the easy bit, as long as you do that bit well. But there's also the implementation. Bruce McCarthy tells a really interesting story about a leadership team that finally agreed on 4 OKRs. 4 was probably too many for the size of the organization, not enough focus, but they agreed on 4. Wonderful, we have agreement. The CTO walked out the room, wrote all 4 on a whiteboard in front of his team, and then drew a line through 2 of them and said, we agreed these, but we're going to ignore them. Pretend they don't exist. The reality of that decision wasn't that there were 4 OKRs, it's that there were 2. Because the implementation changed the actual decision. So we need to recognize that that's equally important. Not all decisions are made equal. Some are small, some are large. And so we talked about we're in this zone of empowerment. Well, we might also think about leverage. A senior leader making a decision about let's add this feature is a very low leverage decision, generally. Heck, even a product manager, in many cases, it's a relatively low leverage decision for which feature we should add. Yeah, there's a reason that Steve Jobs wore the same clothes every day. To the point earlier, we've only got so much cognitive capacity. He wanted to take a decision every day off the table. One decision. Zuckerberg does the same now. He's making crazy decisions at the moment. But let's gloss over that for a second. Because we've got this limited capacity. Jeff Bezos, who is universally considered one of the best decision makers on the planet, He is, and in fact, if there's a really great podcast of him with Lex Friedman, where he talks about his goal with Blue Origins, Blue Horizon, whatever the space company is to make them the most decisive company on the planet. Taking all the things he's learnt in Amazon, which he's already considered to be a phenomenal decision-making culture, and taking them to another level there. Because he recognizes how important decision-making is. And he has this simple goal to make 3 high-quality decisions every day. But sometimes it gets phrased as good decisions, but it's really high-quality decisions. And you might ask, what's a high-quality decision? A high-quality decision is one where you've done the work, basically. You've thought it through. You've got a clear rationale. You've gathered sufficient data, not being totally exhaustive. You draw a line at some point, and you make a decision with what you know now. It still might get a crap outcome, because tomorrow something changes. But you made a good decision, a high-quality decision, based on what was available. Donald Rumsfeld, who is US Secretary of State, he says you should make a decision. He's got the 40-70 rule. Should make a decision when you have 70% of the information you would ideally have. Not less than 40, because anything less than 40, you're guessing. Anything more than 70, you're taking too long. You're not going to make a better decision with it, and you're going to be late. That was, for an example of taking military action, for example. Ultimately, we're trying to make the best decisions we can, and we're raising the chances of making good decisions with good outcomes. We're making our own luck. Versus if we just guess, well, it might go well, it might go badly. But the higher quality decisions ultimately correlate with better outcomes, typically, on the long run. We're going to make good ones with good outcomes. We're going to make ones with bad outcomes. But sometimes it's just worth moving quickly. You've probably heard the one-way, two-way door analogy from Amazon. Big, consequential things. Take your time, think about them, and then decide, because you can't roll them back. Whereas your two-way doors, they're easy to change. Now, I think there are a whole range of doors in between there. I'm not going to dive into that for today, but ultimately, the decision velocity in a team can be a superpower for any product team. And if you've got a clear mission, it can help you make them. And then if you start thinking about, well, where is the highest leverage? Now I'm working out on what decisions should I make? Like, if I'm making a low leverage decision that I'm empowered to make, great. But why am I spending my time on it? There's things that I might throw off my table, that I might just delete, because it's just not important. I'm trying to find this sweet spot. And there are other things that I might delegate down. Sharing the context, though. It's not about delegating your responsibility and just washing your hands of it. It's saying, this is what I know and understand about the context, but you're in a better position to make this decision than me. Or, actually, I can't make this one. I'm not empowered to. This needs to go up the tree. But share it with a recommendation. There's this really simple human behavior. Instead of saying, here's something, please decide, say, here's something, and I recommend we do X because of Y. Because you've thought it through, you spent time on it, and 90% of the time the decision comes back exactly as you recommended because you've thought it through. And that has the act of often growing your zone of empowerment. But it's also taking responsibility for getting a good outcome by making a recommendation. And just saying those words really simply on anything where there's a decision being made where you've thought about it and you're de-escalating it is super powerful. And you'll kind of be seen as more of a leader in an organization as well, which is useful as a product person. So that leads to a principle, and there are 14 of these going into the book, but this is the only one for today, of making the highest leverage decisions that you're empowered to make, which is part of the making decisions stage of decision making. But like I said, you might not be the best person to decide always. Remember, you've got a trio around you, and even an extended team. If it's a design decision, go ask your designer. Get them to make the decision. Empower them to make a decision instead of just taking it on as a product manager. If it's a technology decision, an implementation decision, get out of the way your engineers. Now, this is a lesson I had to learn a lot early in my career because I am an engineer originally. I would write my requirements as how to implement it. In some cases, I'd even written the ISO standards that we were implementing against. So I knew exactly what it was supposed to be. But I had to step back from that. I was happy to have a conversation in a room with the team about how I would approach it, but getting out of the way and empowering them. I mean, Marty, if we go back to him again, would say the single biggest differentiator in any high-performing product organization is empowered engineers. We're just turning them into builders. We're losing a lot of their mind. Like there's probably 6 to 10 of those on your team. If you're just telling them what to build, that's 6 to 10 brains that are not being engaged on really creating value. So as I say, I've changed the book title recently, but if anyone is interested in following along, either joining the Early Readers Club or just joining the mailing list to see how it comes along, there's a QR code there. It's just theitdependsbook.com. Other than that, I would say, let's make some better decisions.
All right, thank you very much, Phil, and thank you very much,